This review is brought to you in part by Rogers Hobby Center in Saginaw, Michigan, where the fun begins. Thanks for joining us at Right On Replicas, where we're proud to bring you the best scale model kit reviews on the planet. This review covers the Cop-Out Plymouth Duster Funny Car, a design by Tom Daniel, in 1/24th scale. It's a Revell model kit number 85-4093. It's a skill level 2 kit for the average builder, and it was molded in black, chrome, and clear with 98 pieces. It features the tech of the 70s duster and funny car conversion and includes a tubular frame, a roll cage, a firewall, fuel and water tanks, and a blown 426 engine. It's got dual drag chutes to stop, and it's decked out with roof flashers and gumball lights. It also has some sponsor decals. It's a really fun model to build. And it also includes 2 soft vinyl wrinkled Racemaster drag slicks and 2 non-labeled front tires, along with the old school direction sheet. The finished dimensions are about 8 1/4 inches long, 3 inches wide, and 2 1/4 inches high. Here are the contents of this kit. As you can see, the parts are bagged so they don't get marred by the tires. And it comes with some colorful decals. And that's up to you on how you want to display. But I want you to keep in mind we'll be using Model Master liquid cement for most of construction, some super glue for strength in fragile parts, and white glue to install or clear glue for the windows. Now remember, heed the manufacturer's suggestions for safety when you're using any of the products that you hear or see in the review. To begin with, I did some body prep. And there's a small mold line there at the quarter panel pillar, and I sanded that off with some fine sandpaper. It was about a 800 grit, and removed that line. And because it was a fairly flat panel, I just used some nail polishers to smooth it out completely. Now these come with different grits right on the same bar, so you can use them progressively until you get to the finest one to really smooth it out and make for a nice smooth finish for paint. And finally, I used some car wax to really smooth it out and make it a nice smooth finish. I went over the entire body with a fine sanding pad. It's about a 2000 grit, something to just give the paint a little bite, and then I sprayed the entire thing with some Duplicolor primer, allowing a few minutes between coats, about 10, and then finally a nice wet coat, followed by once that was dry, and I let that dry about a half an hour, I went over it with the Duplicolor black metallic, and then once again about 10 minutes between the initial coats, and then finally some wetter coats until I got a good coverage. Then I let that dry completely. Once the paint was completely dry, I went over and polished it out once again with some car wax to give it a nice sheen and smooth finish. I then applied some bare metal foil to the bumpers, and that's really pretty easy. It's like tape. You just cut some of the foil product off about a little larger than the size of your feature. You stick it on like tape, tamp it down, and then you trim off the excess with a real sharp hobby knife. Locate some of the interior parts like the cockpit shroud, and I painted that silver over the raw plastic, and then as soon as that was done, I placed it in the freezer for about 10 or 15 minutes, and that gives the paint a faded look, so it almost looks like a bright aluminum. Now after that, I removed it from the freezer and then let it air out, and rubbed it with a clean cloth to just make sure that it was nice and subtly smoothed. We'll get the rest of the parts here. As you can see, the frame rails and the braces and bulkheads, and of course the brace there, this main one, and the bulkheads were painted with the same silver technique that I used on the floor pan. And I didn't paint the rails, however. These were left unpainted because they're just the right color. And then they glue together very nicely in this manner. So assemble the cage here for the chassis. Here are the 4 pieces for the rear end section. And it's pretty generic. You've got your pumpkin and the coils are attached to the radius or the wheelie bars there. So the chrome has to be scraped away from the gluing points so that you get a good bond. Okay, and then just line everything up. Make sure that it's straight and stay straight after you glue the pieces together. I used super glue here for strength. There's about 14 parts to build the engine up. So assemble the engine halves and the cylinder heads, and then the blower manifold was assembled together and painted the block orange to show the Hemi 426 basic color. Once that's dry, the blower assembly and the rocker covers are put on, and it looks pretty good when the motor is complete. Now we're going to go out of sequence a little bit here and put the engine into place. It's easier to make sure that the engine is positioned properly if there's nothing in the way. So go ahead and do that. Scrape the paint where the engine sets on the mounts and install the engine, making sure it's square and it's perpendicular, vertical there. Now the directions call for the fuel tanks to be put in, but we're going to put those in after the engine is placed. And to make them look flush and even, we're going to drill the holes out a little bit for those for the fuel tank and the cross member there brackets. And it just helps everything line up a little bit better than making sure that there's no flash in the holes. So it's starting to look complicated. We're going to install that rear end assembly, and it actually turns out to be pretty easy. First, the floorboard panel was slid through the chassis upper and lower side rails to the lower underside panel. And then the rear end and the drive shaft, which were previously assembled, were put into place. You just push them into position. And there's really clear location points, so they lined up nicely and they fit perfectly. Now the floorboard must go in first so that the drive shaft can slide through the hole in it. The next thing that we'll do is to put the floor pan and the firewall into place. And the transmission tunnel needs to be pieced together. So first the floor pan and then the firewall, and after that's in place, the steering components, like the steering wheel and the column there, went in without any problems. So go ahead and get those installed. There are clear location points for these parts, and the direction sheet's pretty clear to show you where they go into place. Remember to scrape the plating off before you glue the pieces. Next we'll add the blower belt. And you put that onto the engine, but make sure that the engine is dry and firmly glued into place. Then you just slide working from the underside, you slide the belt up over the main crankshaft pulley and then up to the blower drive. And it fits well and looks good. Now we can put those fuel tanks into place, so locate those, and they're made up of two parts, so you have to assemble the halves. And there's going to be a seam, but the only other way to deal with that is to finish them off, remove the chrome, and then re-chrome them or paint them. So in this case, I'm just putting them together so that you see their location and where they're placed. So here's where we are in the subassembly. As you can see, this is going together well, and of course the engine and drivetrain and the roll cage is put into place. It's time to locate the front steering linkage and pieces, and so you remove them carefully from their trees because they're fragile and they'll break. I would use a nice pair of sprue cutters, a fine point sprue cutter, to get those off. Make sure you don't break them. The drag link, the tie rods, and the steering link and the sway bar, they're all very fragile, so you'll have to be patient when you remove those. They fit perfectly, but you need to really study the directions and look at the pictures here to see how they go together and where they're placed. Patience is important, and there's a lot of chrome parts that you'll have to scrape without breaking or damaging the pieces, but to use some super glue for strength once you've located the gluing points and gotten those test fits so you know where they go. So go ahead and find the tires. And these are nice wrinkled slicks, and they really look good if you do some special work to them. So go ahead and clean those up after you remove them from the sprue and get them ready to work with. The first thing to do is to use some super glue to put the two halves of the rear slicks together. And then I use some black electrical tape to tape carefully around the tread area and lay it down nice and smooth. Make sure that the edges are in the right place. And the tape is wider than the tires, so then we'll use an X-Acto blade and rotate the tire and trim that tape off to about where the tread area would end on the tire. So with a little light pressure you can go around the tire. Now the tires then will look pretty smooth, and the tape line is hidden at the bottom of the tire, so we'll leave it down there. We're going to assemble the tire or the wheels to the tires now. Of course, the rears are a little deeper than the fronts, and then the wheel backs, you'll want to paint those black. So go ahead and put those together and get them ready for staging. The three pieces out, the seat, tub, and the upper cage assembly, and then they're pretty simple. They go right together, of course. And the belts were colored with like some silver Sharpies to make those look the buckles look realistic. Locate your gluing points and fit the tub into the chassis, and the top of the cage goes to the back of the tub and to the chassis bars. Okay, and then this is one place where it's important to kind of test fit, make sure everything lines up so that you know where the parts go before you add glue and put them into place. With the chassis finished, you can put the tires on, pop those onto the axle spindles, and everything looks really good. If you need to do a little twist to make sure that all four tires match and hit the floor, you can do that at this time. Be careful though, just to make sure you twist it enough for that to happen. Get the interior body panel and mock that up and make sure that you know where the gluing points are. And you also have to, of course, remove paint as well as chrome so that you get a good bond when you glue parts together. So install that into place now. Now it's time to assemble the light bar, and it's got an amazing 14 pieces for this assembly. So get those out of the kit, and everything is pretty well indicated in the instructions on parts layout and where the gluing points are and where they go. So line that up with your instructions. And then the red and the blue under the bubbles were done with the Sharpie marker for some detail, and made the chrome look like a clear or colored plastic, just like the real thing. Everything goes together pretty well and looks good. Just glue them sparingly, don't use a lot of cement, and put that together. Now it's time to turn our attention to the decals. And these gorgeous decals are quite large, so I strongly suggest that you use some warm water when you remove them. And then after about a 30-second soak, let them set about a minute to make sure that they loosen up very well. You don't want to start moving these decals and find some of it still attached. So I strongly suggest you use some of the setting solutions available on the aftermarket, like the microscale products, and you simply use a considerable amount of warm water on both removing and a little bit on the model itself. And then also you use the microset type of solution to paint where you're going to put the decal, slip it into place and move it around, smooth it out, make sure there's no air or water bubbles trapped underneath them, and then put some of the top solvent on there to seal them into place and conform to contours. And once you get that done, it's up to you. I usually put a coat of clear over the top of the decals to make sure that they stay in place and blend in more with the paint. Now these decals worked pretty well, and overall they fit on the body lines, and they're smoothed out nicely, but they will still get popped a little bit over the black finish and go into place without any issues. After the decals and or the clear coat have dried at least overnight, then you can go ahead and install the light bar. It fits right into place where it should, and it looks great. Set the body onto the chassis, and there you have it, a completed model. This model looks outstanding. Here's a driver's side view, and we'll give you some more of those. There's passenger side and rear views, but this kit was great. It's a lot of fun to build, and what a concept. Tom Daniel had one of the most fertile imaginations in the design world. Everything went together in this kit, fit almost perfectly, just a couple of minor tweaks, but always remember to test fit everything. The number 2 skill level is just about right, although if you don't pay attention, you can get into trouble with the decals. A more experienced modeler wouldn't have any issues, and he may even want to add some detailing. So, if I were you, I'd buy one and put it on my shelf. Well, we hope you like this premium step-by-step model kit review. And so that you don't miss any more, please subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can find us on Facebook and at our website, though, right on replicas.com. Thanks.